Okay, so welcome to this European SchoolNet School Education Gateway webinar on active citizenship. School Education Gateway is an initiative of the European Commission to support schools across Europe, teachers across Europe, to really start to explore different themes, connect and share. So there's lots of different activities going on, and you can see all of those at the School Education Gateway website. And there'll be links at the end of this webinar to direct you to those, and also direct you to the recording of this webinar and to further information about this theme and other upcoming webinars, which will be of great interest. I should introduce myself. I'm Elin McCallum. I'm going to be moderating this webinar, very much introducing our two speakers, and perhaps introducing some of the questions that you may have about what they talk about. I'm delighted to welcome, that's my name, Elin McCallum. I represent Bantani Education, working with the European Commission on these webinars. And I'm delighted to welcome Isabelle da Costa. You can see her also sharing her webcam here. So hi, Isabelle, pleased to have you with us. Isabelle is a policy officer, researcher, analyst at EACEA in the European Commission. She has led the research into policy and implementation surrounding citizenship education at school in Europe, and she will present the results of the report that was completed last year on this topic, and hopefully it really does provide insights into what's happening at school level, at policy level, in terms of different themes, from strategy, from teacher training, head teacher training, through to implementation in the classroom, different methodologies, pedagogies, and also then assessment. So she'll take us through that. And then we'll be joined by Cinzia Billa, who is a teacher and a teacher trainer from Italy, from Sicily in Italy. She works in a school, she works as a teacher trainer in a local university, and she's also been a teacher trainer on the Pestalozzi program from the Council of Europe, which was very influential in terms of teacher training for citizenship education, including the themes of human rights, democracy, and also, of course, recently the Council of Europe have launched the reference framework for competences for democratic culture, which are linked now to the recommendation on key competences at European level, on the citizenship competence highlighted there. So we're delighted to have Isabelle with us, and also Cinzia. Isabelle, as you can see now, Cinzia will join us just a little bit later. She is online, but not visible right now. Now, I wanted we did, School Education Gateway carried out a survey just quickly before this, with all the participants who registered for this webinar. And we looked at different themes. Is it less, this theme of citizenship education, which is so important in the society we live in right now, is it less of a priority than other subjects? Do students have opportunities to develop skills relevant to this? Do teachers have enough resources? Do students have opportunities to exercise this active citizenship skills competence? Do schools work with external citizenship organisations? And are students exposed to citizenship often enough as part of their curriculum? These are some key questions, and I think it's very linked to the research that's being carried out by Isabelle and her team, which I had the pleasure of being involved in too. And she will present some of the results. But this is the survey that was done by the School Education Gateway. If we look at some of the results from those participating in this, you can see the green and the blue on the left-hand side is very much the kind of fully and quite a lot. Then you have the yellow and the light blue on the right-hand side, which is not so much, not at all. So you can see the sort of the framing that is it a priority? Most people say yes. Lots of students are developing skills for active citizenship in the viewpoint of those people attending this. Do they have resources? Yeah, about 2/3 do. Do students get to practice those skills? Yeah, again, about 2/3 do. Are students getting enough citizenship education in the curriculum? Not quite so much as 2/3, but most. Do schools work with external citizenship organisations? Not so much, only about half. I think the interesting thing here is that really overall you have 1/3 or up to a half saying, actually, this is not even close to being partially available. This is something that isn't available. So I think what we see here is, although there's a lot of green and dark blue, there's not enough. And with this theme, which is a key competence at European level, which is something that is ever more important in the age of this information society we live in, this digital society that we live in, where we are bombarded with different images, different themes, different ideas that may or may not be true. We have to perceive through those what is right in our view. We have to develop our understanding, and we have to make decisions that may have an effect on our society. This is something that needs to be pervading all of education. So without further ado, on that note, let's hear from the European research side from Isabelle, who, as I say, led that research at European level to explore and understand what's happening at school level in Europe. So without further ado, I hand over to you, Isabelle. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really pleased to have you with us.
Thank you, Elin. I'm also very pleased to be able to contribute to your webinar with the results of our latest report on citizenship education. So it was produced by the EUREDICE network, which is a network gathering European countries. And the purpose of the network is to analyze and explain education system and education policies in European countries. And we published this report end of 2017. And just first to give you a bit of information about the frame of the report. It deals with primary and secondary schools in 42 European education systems. So at all it concerns 38 countries, but as you know, some European countries have more than one education system, as it is the case, for example, in Belgium here. And we looked at general education, and also partly at the situation in vocational schools, which is sometimes different from general education. The report focuses on official regulations and recommendations. So it looks at the policies the countries decide to have to ensure that citizenship education is implemented at school level. It doesn't look so much into the practices which are developed at school level, but it already shows that there are differences in these policies. We have seen that the results of the survey you did are not so positive. And when we look at the policies, we can also see that there are differences between countries and that there is room for improvement at the level of the policy. We will go to three main topics, which are which citizenship competencies should pupils and students acquire when they are at school, which teaching and learning approaches should be used to make sure that students develop their citizenship competency. And then a very important question too, how are teachers prepared and supported in their role of a teacher of citizenship education? And we will also look what is done for school heads regarding this topic. So first we started with establishing a definition for citizenship education, because this is a fluid concept and there are different understandings over time and also between countries. So we looked at several important policy documents agreed on at European level. And from that, we elaborated an operational definition for our report. So we consider citizenship education as a subject area, which aims to promote harmonious coexistence and foster the mutually beneficial development of individuals and the communities in which they live. And this citizenship education should help students to become active, informed, and responsible citizens who can take responsibility for themselves and for their communities at different levels. So now let's move to the first topic, the citizenship competencies. So first of all, we looked at the national curricula, the national program that the countries have set for the schools. And we saw that everywhere citizenship education is included. And in order to compare the content of these programs, we established four main areas of competencies. This, if you look into the report, I will give the link at the end. You will see that these broad areas include more specific sub-competencies. So the first area is about interacting effectively and constructively with others. So it deals with competencies such as comparison or empathy. The second area is acting in a socially responsible manner. And this is about making students aware of the interest of the society as a whole through competencies such as respect for human rights or respect for other cultures or religions. The third idea is acting democratically. It's the closest one to the political sphere. And this is about respect for democracy or knowledge of political institutions. And then the last one is thinking critically. And this is about using different sources, media literacy, exercising judgment. Now I show you an aggregate picture of these competencies across the curricula of all the European countries. So it shows the frequency with which the broad areas feature in the national curricula. And so this is distributed between primary, lower secondary, upper secondary, general education, and vocational education. And the first thing to say is that at each of these levels or sectors, you can see that the four areas are present. So it means that indeed there are expectations regarding citizenship education at each level of education. There are also some differences between the levels of education. So at primary level, there is more emphasis on interacting effectively and constructively with others, so the social and personal development competencies. Thinking critically is covered mostly at lower secondary level, and acting democratically receives more emphasis at upper secondary level when students become more aged and closer to the time they will have their full political rights. So this is the content that schools should implement, and there are also recommendations on how the citizenship education should be produced in curricula at school level. No, we should. So I want to show you something else. Okay. So there are three main ways to have this citizenship education integrated in curricula. It can be a cross-curricular team. So it means that it should be transversal and that all teachers somehow share responsibility for introducing citizenship education. It can be integrated into other subjects such as history or languages or social sciences. And finally, it can be a separate subject, a subject on its own. This is the situation at primary level. So this blue shows that the three approaches are combined, and you see that few countries combine these three approaches. In fact, the most widespread situation is to have citizenship education as a cross-curricular team and also integrated to other subjects. And when we look at secondary education, the situation is close. Okay, there are more countries with separate subjects, but it is not a majority. In most countries, it is a cross-curricular team and it is integrated into other subjects. So this means that many teachers have to be involved in delivering citizenship education, and also that they have often autonomy regarding really the time that they will devote to citizenship education and the emphasis that they will put on it. So indeed, these are the countries with separate subjects on citizenship education. So there are 20 education systems concerned. In Bulgaria, it's not yet implemented, it's voted, but it will be implemented in the next years. And you can see here with the colors, the different colors, whether citizenship education takes place from the beginning until the end of school education, or if it's only taught during some grades. So in fact, it varies a lot across countries. It can be taught only during one grade, or it can be taught from the first year of primary education to the last year of secondary education. But this is where it's only the case in France. And also some countries like Estonia and Finland have quite long periods of school education during which there is a compulsory separate subject. So now, so many teachers are supposed to implement citizenship education somehow in the classroom. And for the report, there was a research literature made to understand which are the right pedagogy to teach citizenship education. And it was clear that they are the traditional teacher-centered pedagogy is not the most suitable one for citizenship education, that there are other pedagogies which are maybe more suitable, because they will more involve students, like active learning, or they will allow discussions and debates between students. They will also deal with talking about controversial issues in the classroom, issues not everybody agrees with, looking at information, involving students working together in small groups. And also participative learning is a very interesting pedagogy for citizenship education, where students can more direct their own learning experience, as for instance when they participate in volunteering or extracurricular activities where they are really actors regarding the process and the content. So citizenship education is implemented in the classroom, but in the school, it's not only in the classroom that it is possible to provide citizenship education. It should also be part of school life. And for example, a good way is to having students participating in the decision making at the school level. There are regulations and recommendations on student participation in school decision making in all European countries. Sometimes the role of students is mostly consultative, so they are not real decision makers. But still, it's interesting for the citizenship competencies that they somehow participate in these decision-making processes. It's an opportunity to experience practical citizenship skills. And there are three main arrangements for student participation in school decision-making. There can be election of class representatives who will deal mostly with the issues of the class. There can be student councils at the school level where there are only students, but they have a say on some topics school-wise. And then students can also participate in school governing bodies at the school level, where they sit together with the school head, with staff, with parents, and they may discuss maybe more strategic issues or budgetary matters or what types of extracurricular activities should be implemented. So student participation in school decision making is certainly an important part of citizenship education at school, such as the classroom and such as also student participation in extracurricular activities where they can have contact with local community actors and organizations. Now I move to the last topic, the preparation of teachers and school heads, who are both really key actors in implementing this citizenship education, in making it really alive at school. And regarding teachers, we looked at two main ways through which public authorities at top level can influence how teachers are prepared to teach citizenship education. So the first way is by making sure that there are opportunities to specialize in citizenship education, which are offered in the country. And so teachers can specialize in citizenship education or in citizenship education and 2 or 3 other subjects. And this is the countries in blue are the ones where now this specialization is offered. So there are 12 countries concerned, and it's important to underline that this is the case only since recently. So some of these countries introduced the specialization very recently. There is another way for public authorities to influence the content of initial teacher education, and it is by defining specific competencies related to citizenship education that all prospective teachers, so also the math teacher, the language teacher, should acquire during the initial teacher education. So this is the second way, and there are more countries which have defined such competencies. We will look into the content a bit later, but it's important also to say that in all the countries in pink, there are no top-level initiatives to make sure that initial teacher education really prepares teachers to be able to teach citizenship education. It is left to the autonomy of higher education institutions, and so it raises some questions as to whether teachers have really possibilities to be prepared. Especially in some countries, there are separate subjects of citizenship education, and there are no specialization offered. So now, if we look at the content of the competencies that all teachers should acquire in several countries, we have defined them into 5 categories. So first of all, they should have acquired the knowledge and understanding of what needs to be taught. They should acquire pedagogical skills to be able to plan relevant activities So engaging students in debates, in collaborative learning, and they should also have social competencies to be able to lead classroom debates and also liaise with the local community to make sure that extracurricular activities are offered, because this requires also some collaboration between schools and the outside world. And then there are two other main competencies. The ability to evaluate and improve its own teaching practice, so the idea of a reflective practitioner, and also an awareness of the value core to citizenship education, so the democracy, the rule of laws, and these two areas are less often covered in the competencies defined in a couple of countries for initial teacher education. And now I would like just to say one more thing about school heads, who are also very important in citizenship education, because as we saw, it's not something that happens only in the single classroom. It's something that has to be a bit global into the school, and regarding student participation into school governance, school heads have really a role to play. Also, when citizenship education has to be cross-curricular, it is interesting that school heads can support collaboration between teachers to make sure that they coordinate the efforts and the activity. And when we look at continuing professional development, which is offered, we see on the left map that it is often offered for teachers, public authorities in many European countries, so the countries in blue, organize or support CPD activities for teachers on several issues, such as preventing discrimination, promoting respect for diversity or intercultural education, so CPD in the area of citizenship education. But the situation for school heads, it's quite different, because there are only 14 European countries where in the reference year, 2016-17, there were some continuing professional development offered or supported by public authorities, such as how to encourage cooperation between teachers or how to promote a democratic school culture. So this is the end of my presentation. You can find much more country examples and information in the full report. And I now leave it to Elin to continue to animate the webinar.
Thank you so much, Isabelle. Let me just put my camera on, and then we can both be seen. Hello. Right, I'm now using headphones. They're bright orange. It's not my head that's changed, it's just the headphones. But thank you so much, Isabelle, for that. I can say that there's some really interesting content to that report. You know, the detail that provided, particularly I think interesting is the pedagogies. The assessment is always a topic that is key to these areas and themes, be it citizenship education. There are the assessment of the kinds of competencies that need to be developed to support citizenship education. It can be difficult. It can be something that teachers are not familiar with, so that can be interesting. Now, I think there's a couple of things that we can just follow up on. Now, of course, if anyone's got any questions coming through, please add them into the chat box. But I think I'd like to sort of just highlight a couple of things. Again, that, you know, this year, I think just a few months after this report was published, there was a new revised set of key competencies launched at European level. The recommendation in 2006 was now then revised in 2018. The citizenship competence, it's now called that within the new key competence document. And I think I would be fair to say, Isabelle, that the information in your report very much supports what the citizenship competence is going to be, is looking to achieve for learners, and can really support teachers and the school level, very importantly, to see how to start to implement that at school level. I think that's fair to say. Would you agree, Isabelle?
Yes, I think that you really see also the differences between countries. So it's a good tool for that can be used at different levels. It can be useful for teachers. Can also be useful for decision makers when they become aware of the policies that the other countries are carrying out. And you see that there are many differences, many different ways to approach this topic across Europe. And also I think that many people wonder if what they do is the right way, what they could change. It's really an alive topic at the moment. There are many expectations on the role of schools in promoting citizenship education. And so we are happy and interested to produce this report.
Absolutely.
In
now,
this period.
In the key competence recommendation, they've also highlighted some recent work from the Council of Europe. I mentioned it earlier, and I'm just going to add the link to that Council of Europe reference framework for competencies for democratic culture into the chat box there, so you can also look at that. Someone just commented, Athanasia, as a competence, I think it's developed by doing, not from theory. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Citizenship education, it's something you need to experience as well as understand, the sort of the whys, the whats, the hows of being a citizen, and the different structures that you need to be part of, you need to be aware of, you need to be an active citizen within. Now, Cinzia has just absolutely agreed with what Athanasia has said, definitely, and Raquel also. So, but I'd also, advocate having a look at the report. It's very interesting, as Isabelle says, to really compare what's happening in different countries, to look at the different approaches within teacher education, and also then comparing that to what's happening in your own country. So, I'd like to say thank you very much to Isabelle. We really appreciate your input to this. And the next stage will be, of course, then to hear from a teacher to look at the more practical reflection. So, Isabelle, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We will be doing a few more questions at the end if we can come back to you then. Thank you. So now I'd like to transfer the presentation to Cinzia, who is a teacher trainer. A active trainer within the Pestalozzi project within Council of Europe, which was very much teacher training for citizenship education, human rights, democracy, and I think has been very active in this field at both sort of school level teaching and also then supporting future teachers. So Cinzia, if you'd like to turn your camera on, then we should be able to see you. Okay. I can hear you. It's all good. Can you see me? I can't see you yet, no.
Cinzia, just can you see yourself? Because yeah, just in the middle.
We're coming on screen now. Brilliant. Wonderful. It's great to see you, Cinzia. Thank you so much for joining us. Cinzia is joining us from Sicily, in Italy, from Palermo, and we're delighted to have you with us to really give us a teacher training perspective on this from someone who's been involved in various very practical initiatives. So I hand over, Asi, if you can change the presentation over to Cinzia's presentation, that would be great. And then, Cinzia, you can click through your own presentation on screen.
Okay.
Just wait.
So thank you very much. I am really pleased to join you. I talk from my experience. So I've been teaching in a vocational school. Youngsters from 14 to 18 and 19. So I beg your pardon if my perspective is influenced by my experience in this sense. So I found very provoking the presentation, the previous presentation of the report, and I would like to start by reacting to a data in the age where think critically is the increasing skill. In that age, in my school and in many high schools in Italy, but I can see it is an experience very, very common. Students do not participate in the case of the item was student participation in school decision making, and very, very practically in my school once a month there is a sort of assembly in which students are there to share problems, and they should be really the center of all the debate about school problems, and so it is an important moment for citizenship and to act citizenship. But what happens is that after 1 hour of lesson, after the first hour, they have the time to get the place where this assembly will be held, and most of them go away. Do not they are very, very few. So just a little group. My school counts 2,650 students. So there are, you can imagine there are 20, 30 students who stay there. So this is a point. I think we should really look at a sort of crisis, and maybe the secret of this crisis is the fact that if we thematize citizenship, so if it is something thematized as something commanded, ordered somehow, this does not move students. The problem is to act. So teaching citizenship, I'm trying to go, okay, I found it. Teaching citizenship is something which is not only, the focus should not only be the aim of teaching, but the way we teach, acting citizenship. To practice an inductive way and an inductive approach to teaching. Citizenship in the curriculum. This is something that many teachers discuss about in the curriculum as a separate subject or not. This implies an educational perspective and teaching approach. This has to do with that. In a content-based approach, citizenship should be a separate subject, but a competence-based approach needs a cross-curricular approach where teachers should approach the knowledge, skills and understanding inherent within every curriculum subject. So citizenship is not only a topic, but it's a way and a way to learn also. We learn to be citizens, and this has to do with critical thinking as well, and we are citizens who learn in a perspective of lifelong learning. What do we learn? Why do we learn? How do we learn? We learn through experience, and we learn if we are attracted by someone, by something which appeal to our interests. And the sign, the result of our learning is our change. The fact that we change in our awareness, in the awareness of who we are and what we need, and a change through the way we act in reality and interact with others. What do we learn? So what is our curriculum about? We have hard skills, namely cognitive skills, and we have a formal, informal and not formal learning, but we also have soft skills, non-cognitive skills. And in particular, this is very important because, for example, the big five, so the soft skills are the so-called big five: extraversion, agreeableness, consciousness, etc. So these big five are not only something which is parallel to cognitive skills and hard skills, but non-cognitive skills, helping also responsibility, the capacity to interact with other people and to participate in a debate, managing conflict, or all these non-cognitive skills help these citizenship skills, and they help hard skills. Recent research by Heckman and Coates has demonstrated that we have not two parallels, but non-cognitive skills are important and essential to increase hard skills. So the person is one and united, is not separated. Citizenship has to do with the whole curriculum, because the taste of citizenship should be experimented in an inductive way. I insist on that, as a way to learn in all subjects, because knowledge is reticular. How can we find a solution to a problem, for example? This is an issue which is crossing every subject: maths, foreign language, history. So this leads to the choice of good strategies, good pedagogical approaches: cooperative learning, problem solving, argumenting, debating, managing conflict. Managing conflict means, for example, that classrooms are one of the favorite settings for conflicts, even among students, among pupils, but also between the teacher and students. dialogue skills are a sort of an important focus and revealing that citizenship is something which is not only cross curricular but also cross level. A good speaker, a good or teacher who is who has practiced good dialogue, not only with students but with his colleagues, and this is maybe the hardest, I don't know, but in my experience it is. It's a good challenge to be a good speaker and dialogue with the interlocutor with my colleagues. This shows students how the taste of dialoguing, the taste of being together, the fact that being together and being good and participant citizens is tasteful and interesting for them. Activities which can be done. So I just mentioned here one that I practiced during one of my training for pestalozzi. So I chose, it was focusing on dialogue. I chose a passage from a play by UNESCO, The Lesson, and I just divided in groups students, and we using cooperative learning, and we acted the lesson by UNESCO, and then we did a sort of press conference of the characters, and it was very, very playful and interesting, because this increased dialogue, increased reflecting on dialogue, and debriefing moment was very, very important, because everyone had the occasion to reflect on what had happened during that activity. This is an important issue, because our students should really act citizenship in our classroom. They should be the main characters. They should feel involved and important, adequate interlocutors in the situations, and they are they should be involved in discovering how they learned. So in the learning process, and debriefing is very, very interesting. Also for teachers, because we are learning with them, and they realize if we approach to lesson activities as learners or just distributing information. And this is something which makes dialogue inauthentic. You can find a lot of resources on this on the Learn to Change site, website, which is the an association of teachers, and you can enjoy to go there. And especially, I would like to focus on the Cards for Democracy. Cards for Democracy are a resource which is very, very flexible, and it is they are translated in 17 languages, more or less, and so you can use them to act democracy in your classrooms and invent a lot of activities. And there are some which will be introduced in webinars. And We should open to reality. In the previous presentation, I read relevant learning. So citizenship is acted hic et nunc. So reality has to do with so the attention, the introduction to real reality is essential for to act citizenship and to become active citizenship. For example, once I showed this this cover. It was just in 2015, just after Charlie Hebdo event. I just did a lot of questions to my students, and they were put in a very clear and evident way before a particular hot topic. And there were a lot of comments coming from Facebook and so a sort of show and fair of stereotypes. But after some minutes we were talking about this, one student raised her hand and says, but I'm already friend of Achille, and Achille was a mate from North Africa, and they are friends. And so another says, oh, but I'm a friend of, I've got a lot of friends I go out with who come from North Africa, from Morocco, etc. So they just realized that experience had past stereotypes. But they, until that moment, they hadn't realized that. And this was a discover for me, because the media, and especially social media, have got a big influence on that. And they do not make evident the experience, and we should learn from experience. So this opens also the problem of assessment and evaluation, but, and I stop, I would like to hear your reactions to learn myself. I think the keystone of assessment and evaluation is the fact that democracy, the fact that we had to share criteria among teachers, and with students and with families. So democracy is the keystone of a good assessment and evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cinzia. That was very interesting. I think there's been a few different comments about some of the things that you've introduced into that, and perhaps there's some questions that can come from that. Let me turn my camera on. One moment. Hello there. Now, one question that's come through, you mentioned the play that you use within your education process. Now, people have said, oh, that's a really nice idea. Tina has asked, how much time would that take to perhaps implement in the classroom? She works with the IGCSE, and she says she finds it difficult to put things into these programs these days. So, can you give an idea of sort of, the time that would take to implement? Is it something that's integrated into a subject? Is it something that happens alongside? I'm assuming it's curricular, not, but it could be extracurricular, I assume, as well, potentially.
Yes. So if you are an ICT teacher, you should follow your subject and, for example, problems coming from your subject. I mean, for example, as an ICT teacher, maybe you are teaching them how to to find fake news or to produce a document, a web document or a web page upon a topic. And you can do that just moving curiosity and giving a way to act, to interact between them. So how to plan the work together with my mates, which roles are being played in the group, which are the tasks, and so the fact that you are in a, for example, in ICT laboratory is not a limit. It's something that you just use. This does not prevent you from giving them a role, a topic, a task, which is authentic, not something that I already know. So it should be a really survey approach, a really quest approach, and at the end there will be the plenary show of the common work, and the work is good if it is common. If the group has had a good way to interact and to do together, the work is better, is well done. So I mean, there is no situation, no classroom where you cannot practice democracy, dialogue. I don't know if I answered.
Interesting to have, because my next question was going to relate to cross-curricular work, and that's it. I think there's comments coming through. Can you put citizenship into the curriculum? You have to practice it, and I think this is what you're saying. It has to be authentic. It has to be something that people experience, but also people learn about. Now, Claudia Maria Neaxa has asked, what topic? We've lost your camera. Cinzia, I don't know if we can get it back. She's raised her hand. Can we find, have you got a little problem with your camera? Possibly. But we can still, should be able to hear you, no? Now we should be able to hear you now. Can I ask, what topic did you approach in the play? Ah, you're back. Lovely. What topic did you approach in the play, and what did you focus on in your debate? There's a question coming through from Claudia.
Okay. So the passage, the extract from the lesson by UNESCO was about the fact that there was a situation where a teacher is teaching something to a student. So it is a private lesson. I don't know if you have read this, if you have read anything, or so if you ever seen this play. So it was about dialogue, because the teacher continuously repeated the same thing, and the teacher, the character, was pretending that the student had to learn just for the fact that he repeated the same thing. So the fact of repeating should have produced the result of learning. And I chose probably, I wanted to provoke my students because I wanted to provoke a discussion, a debate about my style of teaching. So just playing the roles of the play, of UNESCO's play, we put in the in the foot of we were the other, so they played me, the teacher who was in UNESCO's play, and a student. And after all the reflection about how we felt during that, make us discover what do we expect from the teacher, from dialogue, from learning, and it was very, very interesting what we discovered, one of the other. I don't know if I answered.
Interesting idea. Athanasia has come through saying, absolutely, she's come up with some more ideas for ICT classes, in fact, saying that it's using ICT tools to connect with the real world, offering them, learners, the opportunity to do that, a survey of a real world problem in their community, school, and to use the data to find out more, to explore, to understand some of the, perhaps, society's, the challenges facing local or global society. Absolutely. I think the theme of really linking it, authentic learning, real life learning, that this has to be. I'd like to ask a question, Cinzia. I know within the study on citizenship education, there's a big chunk of work on student participation at school level. And it was a very interesting part of that report, the differences in approach to school councils, to student parliaments. How important do you think it is for students to have a say in at school level, to experience democracy through their school and having that voice there?
Very important, very important. If they are heard, really heard. I mean, it's not a game. It's not to let them play the game of participation and democratic assemblies, etc. It's not a game, it's reality. So, for example, my headmaster, the new one I have this year, really committed with them. And when they had suggestions, they were heard. For example, some of them suggested to repaint the classes. So because they have classes which have been ruined by everything. So some of them suggested, well, I would like to paint my classroom. And he said yes. And now that classroom, which is they are my students, it's really it's perfect. No one would ruin it again, because they by themselves they repainted it. So I think it is very important, but they have to they need to so we should really commit with what they want to do, not just okay, now it's today is the assembly day and you play the game of the assembly. No, it is serious. So what you are saying, I am the adult, I am the teacher, we are teachers, and we are committed with you. We are members
the school level. Culture within the school can be very important on how the student understands and learns and develops awareness of the world around them as well as the world they're functioning in, which, you know, many times 7 hours a day is school, which is a huge part of every young person's life. Now, I've just opened into the chat box. You know, if you've got any questions for either Isabelle or for Cinzia, please add them there. We've got around sort of 10-15 minutes that we can allow for questions. I know I've got a few, but obviously, you know, please share your questions in there. I think it's an interesting comment from Gracinda, saying it's a shame that perhaps people who would need to hear this webinar are not here. Now, for this, you know, perhaps, can I call on Isabelle? And you know, it's very true that sometimes, you know, raising awareness of this topic. This webinar hopes to raise awareness of the importance of citizenship education by bringing in Isabelle, by bringing in Cinzia, to illustrate both from the policy side what's happening and from the practice side different ideas that people can take forward and perhaps point to resources that can be useful. But if Isabelle, could you come in with if we can bring your camera in as well. I'd like to just ask you very quickly to share perhaps the report that you shared is an important tool so that people do hear what needs to happen for citizenship education in Europe. So can you share just a very little bit about how the report is used to highlight this at European level? Who sees it? How's it sent out? You know, that kind of thing.
Sorry, can you repeat your
The report is a great tool for highlighting some of the challenges of citizenship education, and it's the reason that, you know, the Eurydice network is supported by the European Commission, by the team, including yourself, is to really try and profile both the good stuff and some of the challenges that people face, that policymakers face, and that's, you know, that's not perhaps being implemented. Can you share how the key messages from your report are shared to people who need to hear them?
We participate in several conferences in different countries. We also participate in meetings in Brussels where people dealing with citizenship education gather and ask us to give the main findings. We are very active on social media. And also, you know, it's a network with national units in each country. They are most of the time located in the Ministry of Education or an agency responsible for education, and they are also very active in disseminating the results. They have the possibility to translate the study in the national language, because at our level it's available in English, but and in French and German, but many national units translate the whole report or a summary in the national language, and they also disseminate the results in many conferences, national conferences and events related to citizenship education in their country. So there is both dissemination at in European level events and also at national level. I can't hear you.
I turned my volume off. No, I think it's so important that policymakers, that education leaders hear the messages that come through this report, which have been reflected really by Cinzia and her emphasis on, you know, the need to look at both content-based and competence-based citizenship education, looking at this cross-curricular, real-life-based approach, you know, from a whole school perspective and a classroom perspective, you know, and looking at the learning, but also then I think both the report and Cinzia has emphasized the importance of assessment and evaluation of that too. Have we got any more questions coming through? Thank you, Isabelle. Now, Grammati has said that it's important, followed on from Athanasia's comment, that it's important that the students have a voice. Students' councils can be a real tool to address, student-centered problems like bullying, looking at graffiti. And, Cinzia agreed with that, and Grammati's agreed with that. I think that if we look at the prevalence of this student democracy at school level, that wasn't necessarily something that it wasn't by any stretch universal, and sometimes it might be that there is representation, but it's not meaningful representation in terms of you might have a student involved, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have a say in decisions. It's very much, it can be a brave decision for a school to let students have a say in the decisions that may affect more than just the student themselves. But it can be a powerful decision as well, in order to really let students experience and understand democracy and what it means, participation and what it means, and their voice and how they can use that. I think Tina has highlighted here learning in informal situations and places needs to be guided in secondary school, and possibly this can highlight something that Isabelle, you cover within the report, and also I think Cinzia you touched on, and we found in the survey that there were very much less engagement of external organizations in citizenship education when we surveyed the people who were participating in this webinar. Is that important to bring in the outside world to citizenship education? If I can go to Cinzia first, perhaps.
Yes, it is important. For example, there are associations suggesting and proposing to schools activities of service-based learning. For example, here in Palermo, we got an association which gives help to people who are poor or who are coming from other countries, etc. And this is an important activity to give free help in these associations by students. So students are following a sort of a sequence of activities there in these associations, and they learn outside school on following a service learning based
research that you looked at. Was there something that specific that came out about sort of the external engagement, stakeholder engagement into citizenship education? I'm putting you on the spot here for your report now. I apologize for that, because I know that.
I think maybe to complement so yes, it of course in relation to the alternative pedagogy where there is more experiential learning involved, learning by doing, the activities with the local communities are very suitable and offer interesting opportunities. And I think it's also important to invite people from the local communities or from the civil society into the school, not only go outside the school, but invite them into the school and give them the opportunity to have a part of the typical school classes that they will lead and animate, and sometimes they can really support the teachers in, for example, addressing controversial topics. The teachers are not perfectly on their ease to talk about, or are not maybe the most knowledgeable ones, but inviting a very specialized organization from a civil society can also be really an interesting way to teach citizenship education. I can hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Great. I'd like to turn now to looking, I think few people have now flagged up in the comments that, sometimes the structure, the system, education system actually stops you almost from being able to introduce interesting topics, concepts, different ways of teaching citizenship education. Tina's highlighted that she teaches IGCSE geography. She's able to introduce topics, but sometimes if it's too student-led, then they can go off topic, maybe very valuable for the students, but it's not something that then they're not developing the understanding of the knowledge that is going to be within the exam at the end of the year. So time can be the problem, but also then the requirement of the course. She said sometimes she thinks that exams like IGCSE are really killing the dialogue, that I think what she means is so important for citizenship education. And then we've got someone as well, I'm going to scan down just to check. Athanasia has said external organizations, a very hot topic in centralized education systems. Absolutely. In her country, they need central ministry permission for anybody to visit the school and talk to the students. So collaboration then is not easy. And that's something that can really reduce the option of the teacher to introduce some real interesting content. If they don't have the time because of the exam requirements, the course requirements, that it's not flexible enough, and then if they're also barred from doing things by the system itself. So I think that's something that's very interesting to highlight. We've got a couple of minutes. Is there any comments that Cinzia or Isabelle you'd like to make on helping teachers through enabling more space, more more focus, more flexibility within the system, perhaps the structures within which teachers work? Is this something? No, sorry. It's just the comments coming through are very interesting from that perspective, and I think this is where tools like the Eurydice report on citizenship education can really start to raise awareness of that, perhaps, and also, yeah.
Yeah, so just to say that the problematic of the flexibility of the courses and that we didn't look at, but I completely, on the other hand, I completely understand the comment that was made about the course of geography and the fact that if you give space to debate, you don't cover what you are supposed to cover and which will be assessed. And indeed, this is a difficulty that we underline in the report. It is how to assess education. So I think the presentation of Cinzia really emphasized how it can be interesting and beneficial for citizenship education when it is cross-curricular and it is really integrated in the way teachers teach any subject. I suppose this is an ideal way of implementing citizenship education at school. No, when it is only cross-curricular and somehow the responsibility of each teacher to decide how much to implement it, there is not necessarily a corresponding assessment. Maybe there is nothing foreseen at the school level to assess the citizenship competence, and it can be also problematic since that the importance of assessment for learning. So we have seen in the report that countries choose to strengthen the status of citizenship education. To make sure that it's a compulsory module that teachers have to implement, and that there is an assessment which is linked to this corresponding module.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's a couple of people who are having trouble hearing. I hope that we're not losing connection. But Cinzia, you've got your hand up and you wanted to perhaps add something?
Yes, about evaluation and assessment, the study that I mentioned in one of my slides, I mean the one by Ekman and Coates, was a study about the fact that standardized assessment is not able to mostly to find to catch, for example, soft skills. So soft skills which are non-cognitive skills and which are really linked to citizenship are not easily catchable by standardized assessment. So this is a point, and maybe assessment should be rethought again. On the other hand, they demonstrate that soft skills improvement has consequences also in non-cognitive skills. So, and I would say citizenship increases active citizenship may have only a positive result on cognitive skills. So the one we have to, most of us have to put on in the notes at the end of the period, the assessment period. So, but this is a point. I think it's an open field to be explored.
Absolutely. In my work, I do a lot of work on the assessment of. I work with a lot of people who are experts in assessment on soft skills, non-cognitive skills, in terms of sort of the being entrepreneurial 21st century skills, and it is really hard. I think to teach how to assess those skills. There is some work being done around that. I've just put a link into entreassess.com, which might be interesting. And also take a look at certainly the competence framework for democratic culture, because I think that can be of interest too, and it's got a lot of guidance around it, perhaps not specifically on assessment, but certainly it can provide insight and interest. So I think if there's any other questions, and perhaps, do you know, Cinzia, whether there is a section on assessment in the framework, or the Council of Europe framework on democratic culture? Are you familiar? Because I think your organisation that you work with, Learn to Change, has had a lot to do with it.
Yes, but it was a community of practice, the Pestalozzi one. Well, I entered the Council of Europe world through Pestalozzi, and about assessment, there is not so much. There was much more in the community of practice that we were in the Pestalozzi program. I mean, we were a lot of teachers, and we developed a lot of work on that. But there are not documents which were ratified by the Council of Europe. There are a list of competencies, of educational finalities,
has not been.
but the detail of assessment.
Okay, that's fine. It has got some
these concrete
teaching pedagogies around citizenship education, and those. I think it's 20 competencies that are in there. But I know that we're coming to the end of our time now. I think we've had a wide-ranging discussion on citizenship education, from looking at the content and looking at the competence-based approach to looking really from the research perspective, understanding some of the differences across countries and the major themes that are being studied at European level, and what insights we're gaining from that, through to then the more practical teacher approach, with that emphasis, I think, on, this is for, through both of our speakers, this is for all areas of education, all subjects. It's relevant to all levels, and it really needs to be embedded by teachers, but also from that school level as well, because there are mechanisms that can be used by schools, and this must be supported by the education system in order to really enable it to happen in a meaningful way. And there are different actions taking place across Europe to help support that, to inform policymakers and to support teachers, and to hopefully drive this forward. In the chat box here, you've got the feedback survey. We'd be delighted if you could help us to understand how this webinar helped you, or how we can improve in the future. But please, join me on the chat box, and I will say it in person, verbally. Thank you so much to Isabelle and to Cinzia for joining us to share their knowledge and their experience of this topic, citizenship education, so important right now. And going forward, we must hopefully all come together and really try and mainstream this into our work. Thank you so much to both of you. The presentations will be uploaded onto the site. You'll see the links here. You can watch the recording afterwards. You can share the recording with your colleagues. You can send Isabelle's Eurydice report on citizenship education and the recording to your head teacher, to your policymakers. We would be delighted if you did, to share the message of what we're trying to do here. And thank you to School Education Gateway for hosting this webinar. So again, very much thanks to you for participating. It's been a great opportunity to hear some comments from you, to hear from Cinzia and Isabelle, and hopefully to take this message of citizenship education and its importance a little bit wider than it was before. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. Have a lovely evening.